Why did the Galactic Empire keep building secrets inside an empire already built on fear? It is an odd question when you stop to consider the scale of imperial power. By the first years after 19 BBY, Star Destroyers drifted above thousands of worlds. Stormtrooper garrisons occupied distant sectors. The Senate still existed, at least for a time, providing a thin illusion of continuity, while Emperor Palpatine quietly concentrated authority in his own hands. To most citizens, it seemed that the Empire already possessed everything an authoritarian government could desire. Yet behind the visible machinery of control, behind military parades and towering warships, another empire was taking shape. This is the untold history of the Empire's secret projects. And for the next little while, you can simply listen, relax, and drift through some of the darkest hidden corridors in Star Wars canon. If you have joined these journeys before, quietly note which night this is for you. If you are new here, let it be night 1. Far from the crowded sky lanes of Coruscant, a technician walks alone through a mountain facility buried beneath layers of black stone. White lights glow along polished corridors. Ventilation systems breathe with a low mechanical rhythm. Massive blast doors stand closed, each marked with security clearances, granted to only a handful of individuals in the entire galaxy. Behind those doors are laboratories, archives, vaults, and experiments that never appeared in Senate records and never reached public knowledge. The Empire hid many things from its enemies. More surprisingly, it hid many things from itself. What exactly did Palpatine believe he still lacked after becoming Emperor? The answer begins before the Empire officially existed. During the Clone Wars, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine already controlled enormous military resources through the Grand Army of the Republic. He directed campaigns stretching from Christophsis to Umbara, from Felucia to Coruscant itself. Yet even while the Republic fought the Separatists, Palpatine was pursuing goals that extended far beyond victory in the war. The Sith had always sought permanence. Darth Bane's rule of 2 was not merely a strategy for survival. It was a centuries-long effort to concentrate power until a Sith Lord could dominate the galaxy completely. By the time Palpatine revealed himself in 19 BBY, he was not thinking in terms of years. He was thinking in terms of generations. The declaration of the Galactic Empire marked the beginning of a vast transformation. Clone troopers became the foundation of Imperial military power. Republic institutions were reorganized into Imperial ones. Loyal governors accumulated authority while local systems lost independence. At the center stood Palpatine himself, cloaked in ceremonial robes and presenting stability after years of war. Yet documents, novels, comics, and television series released in modern canon consistently reveal the same pattern. Almost immediately after the Empire's birth, resources began flowing toward hidden facilities scattered across the galaxy. Official budgets funded visible fleets. Unofficial budgets funded something else. Why construct secret laboratories on remote worlds when Coruscant already housed the greatest scientific institutions in the galaxy? The Empire understood something simple. Secrecy becomes difficult when millions of people are watching. Coruscant contained trillions of inhabitants. Information traveled constantly. Political rivals existed. Corporate interests competed. Intelligence agencies observed one another. Truly sensitive projects required isolation. Worlds such as Eadu, hidden installations in the Outer Rim, and classified military complexes provided ideal conditions. Scientists could disappear from public view. Supply shipments could arrive without attracting notice. Failures could remain buried. One of the clearest examples appears in the Imperial Department of Military Research. Across multiple canon sources, Imperial science became increasingly compartmentalized. Researchers often knew only fragments of the projects they served. Engineers solved technical problems without understanding larger objectives. Military officers protected installations whose true purposes remained classified even from them. This structure was not accidental. It reflected Palpatine's governing philosophy. Knowledge itself became a resource to be controlled. Information flowed upward toward the Emperor, but very little flowed back down. If fear was already the Empire's greatest weapon, why keep searching for stronger ones? The answer leads directly to Grand Moff Tarkin and the doctrine that would eventually bear his name. Tarkin believed massive displays of force could achieve what conventional military occupation never could. Instead of controlling every citizen directly, the Empire could make resistance seem hopeless. Fear would become more efficient than endless warfare. This philosophy appears throughout canon and reaches its most famous expression through the Death Star. Yet even Tarkin's ideas fit within a larger vision. Palpatine was never satisfied with stability. He wanted certainty. Fear offered certainty. Super weapons offered even more. The strange thing is that many secret projects did not begin as weapons at all. Some started as scientific research. Others emerged from archaeological expeditions, cloning programs, or investigations into ancient Force traditions. Palpatine's interests ranged across astonishing territory. He funded military innovation, certainly, but he also pursued forbidden knowledge. Ancient Sith sites fascinated him. Mysteries of life and death fascinated him. Pathways into the unknown regions fascinated him. Looking backward, many seemingly unrelated projects begin to resemble pieces of a much larger design. A useful clue appears in the Emperor's relationship with the Force itself. Unlike the Jedi, who viewed power as something to be balanced with wisdom and restraint, Palpatine viewed limits as obstacles. Every boundary invited conquest. Every mystery demanded mastery. In films, comics, novels, and television series, he repeatedly seeks ways to expand his control over nature, over governments, over other beings, and ultimately over mortality itself. This obsession becomes one of the keys to understanding why the Empire invested so heavily in hidden research. The Emperor was not merely building an empire. He was attempting to build a future in which nothing remained beyond his reach. Why did so many Imperial projects cluster around remote mountains, isolated moons, and forgotten worlds? There is a practical answer and a symbolic one. Practically, remote locations prevented observation. Symbolically, they mirrored the behavior of the Sith throughout history. Sith knowledge was traditionally hidden, ancient temples were concealed, holocrons were locked away, secrets represented power, even when ruling openly from the Imperial Palace on Coruscant. Palpatine continued operating according to that instinct. Publicly, he governed the galaxy. Privately, he maintained layers of mystery within layers of mystery. The deeper one traveled into the Empire, the less visible it became. Many fans notice an apparent contradiction. Palpatine often projected supreme confidence. He claimed the Empire would last forever. He spoke as though victory had already been achieved. Yet his actions suggest someone preparing constantly for future threats. Secret facilities expanded, classified research multiplied, contingency plans accumulated, entire divisions operated beyond public awareness. Why would a ruler convinced of his own triumph invest so much effort preparing for unknown possibilities? That question will follow us through every stage of this story. For now, picture once more that lonely technician moving through a silent corridor beneath a mountain. Somewhere far above, starships cross the night sky. Citizens sleep beneath imperial banners. Governors file reports. Stormtroopers patrol city streets. None of them know what lies hidden here. The empire they can see is already vast beyond comprehension, yet deeper underground, behind sealed doors and coded clearances, another empire is quietly being built, one secret project at a time. Why was nearly an entire species erased to protect a single secret? The question hangs over the history of Geonosis like dust, drifting through abandoned hive tunnels. Long before the Galactic Empire officially existed, the foundations of its greatest secret project were already taking shape. In 22 BBY, during the final days of the Separatist movement's emergence, Count Dooku received plans for a colossal battle station from Poggle the Lesser on Geonosis. At the end of Attack of the Clones, those plans traveled into Separatist hands. To most observers, they were simply another military blueprint among countless wartime schemes. In reality, they represented the earliest known stage of what would become Project Stardust. The Clone Wars consumed the galaxy for 3 years. Battles erupted across hundreds of systems. Republic and Separatist fleets clashed above planets such as Christophsis, Ryloth, Umbara, and Coruscant. Amid that chaos, construction knowledge survived. When the Republic transformed into the Empire in 19 BBY, Palpatine inherited not only victory but also the hidden ambitions of both sides. The Death Star concept did not disappear with the Separatists. It quietly became an imperial priority. One reason the project remained hidden was its sheer scale. The first Death Star measured approximately 160 kilometers in diameter. Even in a galaxy accustomed to immense engineering achievements, such a structure was staggering. Millions of workers, engineers, droids, technicians, and security personnel would eventually contribute to its construction. Entire industrial supply chains had to be redirected. Vast quantities of raw materials vanished into classified shipping routes. The challenge was not merely building the station, the challenge was concealing its existence while doing so. Why did Palpatine place Orson Krennic at the center of the project rather than a conventional military commander? Krennic understood bureaucracy as well as science. Introduced in Rogue One and expanded through canon reference materials, he served as director of advanced weapons research. He was ambitious, politically skilled, and relentless in pursuit of recognition. More importantly, he knew how to manage secrecy. Krennic spent years coordinating scientists, military officers, contractors, and intelligence services while keeping the full scope of Project Stardust compartmentalized. Most participants saw only fragments. Few understood the ultimate purpose of their work. One of the most important figures under Krennic's supervision was Galen Erso, A brilliant scientist specializing in energy research, Galen possessed knowledge that the Empire desperately needed. Specifically, he understood how kyber crystals could be adapted for unprecedented power generation. In Jedi tradition, kyber crystals served as the heart of lightsabers. They resonated with the Force and were revered as sacred objects. Under Imperial control, they became something else entirely. The Empire sought to transform a spiritual resource into the engine of a superweapon. As the years passed, enormous quantities of kyber crystal disappeared from worlds connected to Jedi history. The Empire stripped resources from locations such as Jedha, one of the galaxy's oldest centers of Force tradition. Pilgrims, priests, and local populations watched sacred sites fall under military occupation. Official explanations referenced security concerns and resource management. The truth ran deeper. Every shipment brought Project Stardust closer to completion. The Death Star would not simply be a giant warship. It would be a weapon powered by technology, derived from the same crystals that once illuminated Jedi blades. Why move major portions of construction away from Geonosis after the Empire gained control? The answer reveals just how seriously Palpatine regarded secrecy. Geonosis had served as a major industrial center during the Clone Wars. Massive orbital facilities already existed there. Early Death Star construction began above the planet, yet over time, increasing portions of the project shifted elsewhere. Facilities on Scarif became crucial repositories for research and technical archives. Laboratories on Iadu advanced key technologies. Other classified shipyards participated in construction beyond public knowledge. Instead of relying on a single location, the Empire spread the project across numerous sites, ensuring that no isolated disaster could expose everything. For the Geonosians themselves, the consequences were catastrophic. Canon sources established that the species was nearly exterminated during the Imperial period. By the time Rebel investigators later encountered evidence of what had occurred, Geonosis had become eerily silent. Vast hive cities stood empty. Industrial complexes remained, but their builders were gone. The Empire officially denied wrongdoing. Yet the timing is difficult to ignore. A species that possessed intimate knowledge of early Death Star construction vanished as Project Stardust approached completion. The animated series Rebels offers one of the most haunting glimpses into this tragedy. When Ghost crew members investigate Geonosis, they discover signs of a massive cover-up. They encounter Click-Clack, one of the last known surviving Geonosians. Around him stretches a world stripped of life. The silence itself becomes evidence. Entire civilizations do not simply disappear without cause. The Empire had buried more than a secret project. It had buried witnesses. Why was the Death Star worth such extraordinary measures? To understand that, you have to see the station through Imperial eyes rather than Rebel eyes. Rebels viewed it as a nightmare capable of annihilating worlds. They were correct. Imperial planners, however, saw efficiency. A single battle station could intimidate thousands of systems simultaneously. Regional governors could rule through fear rather than constant military intervention. Tarkin's doctrine found its ultimate expression here. The Death Star was not merely a weapon of destruction. It was designed as a weapon of political control. The deeper irony is that many Imperial officers never fully trusted the project. In A New Hope, Officers aboard the station debate its value. Admiral Maudie boasts about its power. Others remain skeptical. Even within the Imperial hierarchy, doubts persisted. Resources consumed by Project Stardust were immense. Construction lasted decades. Rivalries emerged between military leaders. Krennic himself spent years battling for influence against figures such as Grand Moff Tarkin. The Empire appeared united from the outside. Inside, powerful individuals competed constantly. Yet, why did the Empire create an entire world devoted to protecting research data? That question leads us towards Scarif, one of the most important planets in the history of Imperial secrecy, hidden behind planetary shields and guarded by formidable defenses. Scarif served as a vast archive. Technical schematics, research records, military plans, and classified intelligence were stored there. The Empire trusted the location so completely that the Death Star's design files remained inside its vaults. Security systems were elaborate. Access required authorization levels beyond those available to most officers. Scarif was not merely a military installation, it was a fortress built around information itself. Yet information has always been dangerous to tyrannies. In 0BBY, a small rebel force launched an operation that changed galactic history. Jyn Erso, Cassian Andor, and their allies infiltrated Scarif seeking the Death Star plans. The battle that followed was desperate and costly. Rebel ships clashed with Imperial forces above the planet while ground teams fought below. Many participants died. The archive was heavily defended. But the plans escaped. And hidden within those plans was Galen Erso's final act of resistance. Forced for years to serve Project Stardust, he secretly engineered a flaw into the station's reactor system. To Imperial supervisors, it appeared insignificant. To the rebellion, it became salvation. A carefully targeted attack could trigger a catastrophic chain reaction. The Death Star represented decades of secret labor, unimaginable expense, and ruthless sacrifice. Yet buried deep inside the Empire's greatest achievement was a weakness planted by one man who never stopped fighting back. As the completed battle station drifted through the stars and Imperial officers celebrated their success, another truth remained hidden beneath layers of classification. Project Stardust was not the only secret program consuming Imperial resources. Elsewhere in the galaxy, scientists were pursuing technologies that extended beyond superweapons. In remote laboratories battered by rain and mountain storms, experiments continued that would raise an unsettling possibility. The Death Star was only one branch of a much larger tree. Was the Death Star truly the ultimate goal of Imperial science? Or was it only the most visible result of research that stretched far beyond a single battle station? The rain begins before you ever see Eadu. Dense clouds wrap around jagged mountains. Water crashes against stone cliffs. Shuttle pilots navigate through storms so thick that entire facilities seem to emerge from darkness only at the last moment. During the Imperial era, this remote world became one of the most important scientific centers in the galaxy. Unlike Scarif, which protected information, Eadu generated it. Laboratories buried within mountain complexes housed researchers working on technologies whose consequences would reshape galactic history. By the time of Rogue One, Eadu had already operated for years under Imperial control. Advanced weapons research maintained facilities there under the supervision of director Orson Krennic. Scientists arrived from countless worlds. Engineers tested experimental systems. Classified projects moved through heavily restricted security channels. The location itself was ideal. Harsh weather discouraged visitors. Isolation protected secrecy. If a breakthrough occurred, the Empire could control who learned about it. Why was Galen Erso so valuable that Krennic spent years hunting him across the galaxy? The answer lies in the nature of Kyber crystals. In Jedi tradition, Kyber crystals were living conduits connected to the Force. Younglings traveled to worlds such as Elam during the Gathering to discover crystals that would eventually power their lightsabers. These crystals were not merely energy sources. They possessed unusual properties that fascinated scientists and mystics alike. Most researchers understood only fragments of their potential. Galen Erso understood more than almost anyone. Before fully realizing what the Empire intended, Galen devoted himself to energy research. His work explored ways to stabilize and amplify enormous power outputs. To ordinary scientists, such studies promised advances in transportation, industry, and power generation. To Palpatine and Krennic, they offered something else. If Kyber energy could be controlled on an unprecedented scale, entire planets could become vulnerable. The Death Star's super laser depended upon that possibility. Without Galen's expertise, Project Stardust might never have succeeded. What makes Edu fascinating is the canon suggests the Death Star was not the only objective being pursued there. Imperial research rarely focused on a single outcome. Scientists investigated reactor technologies, weapon systems, energy transmission methods, and countless supporting disciplines. The Empire believed knowledge itself could become a weapon. Every experiment generated data. Every failure revealed something useful. In many ways, Eadu functioned as a laboratory for the Empire's future. The atmosphere inside such facilities must have felt strangely detached from the wider galaxy. Outside, entire sectors experienced occupation, rebellion, and political transformation. Inside, researchers spent years focused on equations, prototypes, and technical challenges. Many likely convinced themselves they served progress rather than tyranny. Star Wars repeatedly returns to this uncomfortable reality. Evil systems are not maintained solely by villains. They are also maintained by ordinary people who separate their work from its consequences. Why did so many Imperial scientists remain loyal even when they understood what their projects would become? There is no single answer. Some sought advancement. Others feared punishment. Some genuinely believed Imperial rule brought order after the chaos of the Clone Wars. Krennic himself embodies a particular kind of loyalty. He does not worship ideals, he worships achievement. Again and again, in Rogue One, he speaks less about serving the Empire than about receiving recognition for what he has built. Ambition becomes its own prison. This obsession eventually places him on a collision course with Grand Moff Tarkin. The rivalry between the two men reveals another hidden truth about secret Imperial projects. Scientific success did not guarantee political security. Once the Death Star neared completion, Tarkin positioned himself to claim authority over it. Decades of research, construction, and sacrifice suddenly became part of a larger struggle for influence within the Imperial hierarchy. Krennic had helped create the Empire's greatest weapon, yet he discovered that creating power and controlling power were not the same thing. The Battle of Eadu in 0BBY captures this tension with remarkable clarity. Rebel intelligence finally traced Galen Erso's location. Cassian Andor, Jyn Erso, and a small team infiltrated the world. Imperial forces scrambled to respond. Then Rebel starfighters arrived overhead. Y-wings and X-wings attacked the installation, while storms raged around the mountains. In the confusion, Galen Erso was mortally wounded. Years of Imperial effort collapsed into tragedy within moments. Why did Galen choose resistance when escape had become nearly impossible? Because he had already found another path. Rather than openly sabotage the Empire and face immediate execution, he concealed his rebellion inside the Death Star itself. The flaw he designed remained invisible until the station became operational. It was not a dramatic act. It was patient, quiet, hidden. In a strange way, Galen fought the Empire using the same weapon the Empire used against everyone else: secrecy. Yet even as Eadu burned, larger mysteries remained unsolved. The Empire's appetite for research did not end with the Death Star. If anything, it intensified. Throughout canon, Palpatine repeatedly demonstrates interest in subjects extending far beyond conventional military technology. Ancient Sith artifacts attract his attention. Force-sensitive individuals attract his attention. The boundary between science and the Force attracts his attention most of all. Looking back, Eadu begins to resemble a stepping stone toward projects far stranger than planetary destruction. A revealing clue comes from the Emperor's attitude toward knowledge. The Jedi treated knowledge as something to be preserved and shared responsibly. The Sith treated knowledge as treasure, something to be hoarded, something dangerous. This distinction appears again and again across Star Wars history. Palpatine did not merely collect information, he buried it behind layers of security, loyal intermediaries, and isolated facilities. Knowledge became concentrated in his hands, just as political power had. So while the Death Star dominated headlines, military briefings, and rebel fears, another story unfolded in the shadows. Hidden facilities continued operating. Scientists pursued classified objectives unrelated to super lasers or battle stations. Some experiments involved biology, some involved genetics, some reached toward mysteries that neither technology nor the Force had fully explained. And far beyond the rain-soaked laboratories of Eadu, in a secret mountain complex, on a remote world called Wayland, one of the darkest chapters in Imperial science was already taking shape. There, beneath Mount Tantus, the Empire would begin asking questions far more dangerous than how to destroy a planet. It would begin asking how life itself could be controlled. What exactly was Palpatine preparing for decades before his apparent death at Endor? The question becomes impossible to ignore once Mount Tantus enters the story. Hidden deep within a mountain on the remote world of Wayland, this facility remained unknown to nearly everyone in the Empire. Star destroyers could dominate entire sectors, and governors could command planetary populations. Yet even many senior Imperial officers had no idea what was happening beneath those stone peaks. The mountain concealed laboratories, detention chambers, research vaults, and projects protected by extraordinary secrecy. When modern Star Wars canon finally revealed more of Mount Tantus through the Bad Batch, the facility immediately transformed from an obscure location into one of the most important places in the history of Palpatine's long-term plans. The mountain itself feels almost designed for Imperial secrecy. Vast walls of stone shield the installation from observation. Landing platforms disappear into the terrain. Security systems monitor every approach. Scientists work far from public scrutiny. Prisoners remain isolated from the galaxy. The location reflects a pattern seen repeatedly throughout Imperial history. Whenever a project mattered deeply to Palpatine, it tended to vanish underground, behind mountains, beneath oceans, or inside remote regions of space. Why did the Empire invest so many resources into cloning long after the Clone Wars had ended? On the surface, the question makes little sense. The Republic's clone army had already fulfilled its purpose. Order 66 had succeeded. The Jedi Order had fallen. By the early Imperial period, stormtrooper recruitment was gradually replacing reliance on Kaminoan-produced clones. The Empire was moving away from the cloning systems that had won the war. Yet inside Mount Tantus, cloning research expanded rather than disappeared. Clearly, the objective had changed. The key figure overseeing much of this work was Dr. Royce Hemlock, introduced in The Bad Batch. Calm, intelligent, and deeply unsettling, Hemlock represented a different kind of Imperial villain. He did not command fleets. He did not deliver fiery speeches. Instead, he approached living beings as scientific resources. Under his authority, the Advanced Science Division conducted experiments involving genetics, biological manipulation, and force-related research. The facility's atmosphere feels less like a military base and more like a place where ethical boundaries have quietly ceased to exist. One of the most important clues emerges through Omega. Unlike standard clone troopers derived from Jango Fett, Omega possesses unique genetic characteristics. Throughout the Bad Batch, Imperial scientists display unusual interest in her DNA. Hemlock repeatedly prioritizes capturing her alive. The Empire's obsession is not personal, it is scientific. Something within Omega's genetic profile appears essential to projects taking shape behind Mount Tantus's sealed doors. Why would Palpatine care so much about a single clone girl when he already controlled an entire galaxy? The answer begins to emerge through references to M-counts, the modern canon term associated with midi-chlorian levels. Ever since the Phantom Menace introduced midi-chlorians as microscopic life forms connected to force sensitivity, the relationship between biology and the Force has fascinated both Jedi and Sith. Most beings cannot simply acquire Force sensitivity through technology or surgery. The Force does not operate like a machine. Yet Imperial scientists repeatedly search for ways to bridge that gap. They seek methods to transfer, preserve, or replicate qualities associated with Force-sensitive individuals. This pursuit marks a major turning point in Imperial research. Earlier, secret projects focused on military dominance. The Death Star could destroy worlds. Advanced starfighters could win battles. New weapons could intimidate populations. Mount Tantus moves beyond conquest. Here the Empire begins investigating life itself. Questions once reserved for mystics, Sith lords, and ancient Force traditions become subjects of laboratory study. The line between science and dark side obsession grows increasingly difficult to see. A fascinating detail runs throughout Palpatine's story. Again and again, he demonstrates fear of limitation. He fears rivals. He fears vulnerability. Most of all, he fears mortality. In Revenge of the Sith, he tempts Anakin Skywalker with stories about Darth Plagueis and the power to influence life and death. Whether every detail of that tale was true matters less than what it reveals about Palpatine's interests. Even before becoming Emperor, he was obsessed with overcoming the natural boundaries of existence. Why conduct these experiments in secret if the Emperor already ruled without challenge? Because even within the Empire, certain ambitions were dangerous to reveal. Many Imperial officers understood warfare. They understood occupation. They understood political control. Research involving force-sensitive genetics and biological manipulation belonged to another category entirely. Palpatine's inner circle remained remarkably small. Information about Mount Tantus flowed through carefully controlled channels. Scientists often knew only portions of the larger project. Guards protected facilities without understanding what happened inside them. Secrecy remained the foundation of everything. The clone troopers themselves provide a quiet layer of tragedy to this story. Many veterans of the Clone Wars spent their lives serving first the Republic and then the Empire. Some, like Captain Rex, eventually resisted Imperial rule. Others faded into obscurity. Meanwhile, the institution that created them continued evolving in hidden directions. Cloning technology that once produced soldiers now served purposes far removed from military necessity. The same science was being redirected toward mysteries no clone had ever been intended to solve. Why does Mount Tantus feel connected to events occurring decades later? Because modern canon increasingly suggests that it is. Viewers of The Bad Batch know the facility as a center for Imperial genetic research. Viewers of The Mandalorian encounter scientists attempting to work with force-sensitive biological material. By the time The Rise of Skywalker reveals cloned bodies on Exegol and the survival of Palpatine's consciousness, many pieces begin aligning into a larger picture. Mount Tantus does not provide every answer, but it provides part of the roadmap. Importantly, canon still leaves significant gaps. We do not know every experiment conducted there. We do not possess complete records of every research breakthrough. That silence creates one of the most intriguing mysteries in the saga. Some fans believe the Empire achieved far more than we have seen. Others argue that many projects failed repeatedly before producing useful results. What remains clear is that Palpatine continued funding these efforts for years despite immense costs and uncertain outcomes. The Mountain Laboratories also reveal something about the Emperor's patience. The Death Star consumed decades of work. Cloning research consumed decades as well. Palpatine rarely thought in terms of immediate success. He built systems designed to mature slowly. A project begun in one era might not bear fruit until another. From his perspective, time itself was simply another resource to be exploited. As sterile laboratory lights reflected from transparasteel walls deep within Mount Tantus, scientists recorded genetic samples and analyzed biological data. Guards patrolled silent corridors. Prisoners disappeared behind secured doors. Above them, storms swept across Wayland's wilderness. The galaxy continued fighting wars, electing governors and dreaming of freedom, unaware that some of the Empire's most important work was not focused on ruling the living. It was focused on conquering death itself. Did the Emperor begin planning his return long before the Rebel Alliance ever celebrated victory at Endor? The possibility sounds almost impossible when viewed from the perspective of the original Galactic Civil War. In 4 ABY, Rebel starfighters attacked the second Death Star above Endor. Darth Vader turned against his master. Palpatine was thrown into the reactor shaft at the station's core. Moments later, the battle station exploded. To the galaxy, the story appeared finished. The Emperor was dead. The Empire was breaking apart. And a new future seemed possible. Yet decades later, the revelation of Palpatine's return and the rise of Skywalker forced an unsettling question back into the light. When had this plan truly begun? Modern canon increasingly points toward an answer, not after Endor, not during the Empire's collapse. Much earlier, perhaps decades earlier. The clues are scattered across the Bad Batch, The Mandalorian, reference books, and the sequel-era films. Individually, they seem disconnected. Together, they begin forming the outline of a project whose timescale stretched across generations. Why was the Empire so interested in transferring Force-related biological traits? This question sits at the heart of Project Necromancer, one of the most intriguing secret initiatives referenced in modern canon. During the Bad Batch, Imperial officers discuss the project directly. Hemlock's research becomes tied to its objectives. Scientists search for ways to preserve or transfer M-count characteristics. Certain genetic samples prove more useful than others. Omega's unusual value suddenly becomes clearer. The Empire is not simply experimenting with cloning. It is searching for a method to sustain something that ordinary cloning struggles to preserve. One of the great challenges in Star Wars canon involves the relationship between the Force and biology. Force sensitivity is not merely a genetic trait that can be copied like eye color or height. Again and again, attempts to manipulate it encounter difficulties. Cloned bodies may survive, consciousness may survive, but creating a stable vessel capable of containing immense force power appears extraordinarily difficult. This challenge explains why Imperial researchers remain obsessed for so many years. They are pursuing one of the most elusive goals imaginable. The connection becomes even stronger when we reach the Mandalorian era, roughly 5 years after Return of the Jedi. The Empire has officially fallen. The New Republic exists, yet remnants of Imperial authority continue operating in hidden pockets across the galaxy. One such remnant employs Dr. Pershing, a scientist whose research focuses on cloning and biological transfer techniques. Pershing repeatedly discusses the potential of combining desirable genetic traits through advanced scientific methods. His work immediately echoes themes already established at Mount Tantus. Why are Imperial remnants still funding expensive cloning programs after losing the war? From a military perspective, the investment seems irrational. The Empire no longer controls the core worlds. It no longer commands vast fleets. Resources are scarce. Survival should be the priority. Yet remnants continue funding highly specialized research programs. This suggests that certain objectives outrank ordinary military concerns. Whatever these scientists are attempting, their superiors consider it more important than rebuilding armies or governing territory. The mystery deepens with Grogu. Throughout The Mandalorian, various Imperial factions display extraordinary interest in capturing him alive. Former Imperial officers such as Moff Gideon dedicate substantial resources to obtaining his blood. Laboratory records reference M-count levels. Failed test subjects appear in incubation chambers. Scientists struggle to achieve desired results. The series carefully avoids providing complete answers, but the direction is unmistakable. The Empire's surviving researchers are still chasing the same dream that haunted Mount Tantus decades earlier. A fascinating aspect of Project Necromancer is how closely it aligns with Palpatine's established character. Throughout the saga, he seeks permanence. He builds institutions designed to outlive individuals. He manipulates apprentices, governments, armies, and entire civilizations to secure his position. It would actually be strange if a Sith Lord obsessed with unlimited power never explored methods of surviving death. His pursuit of immortality is not a departure from his character. It is a logical extension of everything we already know about him. Why does Exegol feel less like a sudden revelation and more like the destination of a long journey? Because once Exegol appears in The Rise of Skywalker, many earlier mysteries begin fitting into place. Hidden deep within the unknown regions, Exegol houses laboratories, cloning facilities, Sith cultists, and vast military infrastructure. The planet contains imperfect cloned bodies connected to Palpatine's survival. It contains evidence of decades of preparation. Most importantly, it demonstrates that the Emperor's contingency planning extended far beyond conventional politics. He was preparing for scenarios that assumed his physical death. Canon deliberately leaves portions of this process unexplained. We do not know every stage of consciousness transfer. We do not know every scientific breakthrough achieved by Imperial researchers. Some mysteries remain mysteries, yet enough information exists to reveal the broad pattern. Mount Tantus, Project Necromancer, Pershing's experiments, and Exegol all belong to the same family of ideas, different projects, different eras, one long objective. Some fans compare these efforts to older legends stories involving cloned emperors. Those tales found in the non-canon expanded universe explored similar themes decades before Disney-era canon. It is important to distinguish the two continuities. Modern canon does not simply import the Legends version wholesale. Instead, it develops its own explanation using Project Necromancer, Exegol, and contemporary storytelling. The similarities are interesting. The details remain distinct. Why keep the project hidden, even from much of the Imperial leadership? The answer returns us to Palpatine himself. Trust was never one of his virtues. He manipulated apprentices against each other. He encouraged rivalries among subordinates. He compartmentalized information constantly. A project connected to his own survival would naturally receive the highest level of secrecy imaginable. Knowledge represented vulnerability. The fewer people who understood the full plan, the safer the plan remained. And yet there is something strangely human buried beneath all this darkness. For all his power, Palpatine feared the same final boundary feared by countless beings throughout history. Death remained the one enemy he could never fully dominate. The difference is that most people accept that limitation. Palpatine dedicated empires, laboratories, fleets, scientists, and entire generations to escaping it. That obsession became one of the driving forces behind some of the Empire's most secret research. As cloning vats hummed in hidden facilities, and researchers analyzed samples beneath sterile laboratory lights, another branch of Imperial secrecy, continued operating elsewhere in the galaxy. It involved neither battle stations nor genetic engineering. Instead, it focused on surviving Jedi, stolen knowledge, and the systematic hunting of Force-sensitive beings. If Project Necromancer sought to control the future of the Force, another organization was already working to control its present. Its agents wore black armor, carried spinning red lightsabers, and emerged from the shadows wherever the Empire sensed a threat. Was the Inquisitorius truly created to hunt Jedi, or was its deeper purpose to ensure that no one except the Sith could ever control the Force again? At first glance, the answer appears obvious. After Order 66 in 19 BBY, the Jedi Order lay in ruins. Thousands of Jedi had been killed across the galaxy. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant had fallen, survivors scattered into hiding. The Empire needed hunters capable of tracking those who escaped. That role belonged to the Inquisitors. Yet the longer you examine the organization, the stranger it becomes. The resources invested in it suggest goals extending far beyond a simple manhunt. The Inquisitorius emerged during the earliest days of Imperial rule, operating under Darth Vader and ultimately answering to Emperor Palpatine. The organization recruited former Jedi, fallen Padawans, and Force-sensitive individuals corrupted by fear, anger, or desperation. They became known through titles rather than personal names: the Grand Inquisitor, the Second Sister, the Fifth Brother, the Seventh Sister, the Third Sister, and others. Their identities mattered less than their function. They existed as tools of the Empire, disposable, feared, and tightly controlled. Why recruit former Jedi instead of training entirely new dark side agents? Because former Jedi already possessed something valuable: knowledge. They understood the Force, they understood lightsaber combat, they understood how Jedi thought and where they might hide. The Grand Inquisitor himself had once served as a Jedi temple guard on Coruscant. By turning individuals like him, the Empire gained access to insights that ordinary soldiers could never provide. More importantly, Palpatine transformed the Jedi Order's own knowledge into a weapon against its survivors. One of the most chilling headquarters in Star Wars canon reflects this philosophy perfectly. The Fortress Inquisitorius stood on Nur, a moon orbiting within the Mustafar system, surrounded by dark waters and isolated from major hyperspace routes. The fortress rose from the sea like a black blade. Its architecture reflected Imperial severity. Stark corridors stretched through submerged sections of the structure. Interrogation chambers and training halls filled its interior. From this hidden location, Inquisitors coordinated operations across the galaxy. The choice of Nur was hardly accidental. Mustafar already held immense significance for Vader. It was the world where Anakin Skywalker lost his duel against Obi-Wan Kenobi and became physically dependent on his armor. It was also home to Vader's fortress, introduced in canon comics and later seen in live action. By placing the Inquisitorius nearby, the Empire effectively created a regional center for dark side operations. The system became a nexus of fear, secrecy, and control. Why preserve Jedi knowledge at all if the Empire wanted the Jedi erased from history? This is where the story becomes fascinating. The Empire destroyed temples, it confiscated artifacts, it hunted survivors relentlessly, yet it did not simply burn every piece of Jedi knowledge. Instead, it seized and controlled much of it. Throughout canon, Imperial agents repeatedly target archives, holocrons, ancient temples, and Force-sensitive sites. The goal was not ignorance, the goal was monopoly. Palpatine did not want knowledge destroyed, he wanted knowledge owned. This distinction appears repeatedly in Star Wars Rebels. As Ezra Bridger grows stronger in the Force, Imperial attention intensifies. The Inquisitors pursue him relentlessly. They are not merely trying to eliminate a threat, they are attempting to control access to future generations of Force users. Every surviving Jedi represents a competing source of knowledge. Every apprentice represents a future challenge to Sith dominance. The Empire's campaign is as much cultural as it is military. Why did the Inquisitors seem trapped between power and helplessness? Because that was exactly how Palpatine designed the system. The Inquisitors possessed enough strength to defeat ordinary opponents. Many were dangerous duelists. Some could overwhelm inexperienced Force users, yet they were deliberately prevented from becoming true Sith. Vader remained vastly more powerful. Palpatine remained untouchable. The Inquisitors occupied a narrow space where they could serve the Empire effectively without threatening the hierarchy above them. The fate of the second sister, Trilla Suduri, illustrates this reality beautifully and tragically. Introduced in Jedi Fallen Order, she was once a Padawan who survived Order 66. After capture and torture, she fell under Imperial control. By the time she confronted Cal Kestis, she had become one of the Empire's most formidable agents. Yet when she briefly turned back toward the light, Vader executed her without hesitation. Her years of service counted for nothing. Loyalty was useful only until it ceased being useful. Why did the Empire devote so much effort to identifying Force-sensitive children? The answer leads directly into another secret initiative often called Project Harvester. References across Rebels and related canon material reveal Imperial efforts to locate Force-sensitive children before Jedi survivors could reach them. Names appeared in records, families became targets. Entire operations focused on identifying individuals who had never even realized their own connection to the Force. The Empire was not waiting for threats to emerge. It was hunting potential itself. This strategy reflects remarkable long-term thinking. A child identified in 5BBY might become a Jedi Knight years later. Eliminating that possibility early prevented future resistance. At the same time, Force-sensitive children represented opportunities. Some could be studied, some could be recruited, some could become useful assets. The Empire viewed them less as people than as resources to be managed. One of the most unsettling aspects of Project Harvester is how little we know about many of its victims. Ezra Bridger escaped. Luke Skywalker remained hidden on Tatooine. Leia Organa concealed her abilities for years, but countless others never became central characters in the saga. Somewhere across thousands of worlds, children disappeared into Imperial systems. Some records ended abruptly. Some stories were never told. The silence itself becomes part of the mystery. Why were ancient Jedi temples suddenly attracting Imperial attention decades after the Clone Wars? Because Palpatine understood something many Imperial officers did not. Power is not measured only in fleets and armies. It is measured in knowledge. Across Rebels, comics, and novels, Imperial forces repeatedly investigate ancient Force-related locations, temples on Lothal, sacred sites connected to Jedi history, worlds associated with forgotten traditions. The Empire searched for artifacts, pathways, secrets, and insights hidden for centuries. Military conquest was only one layer of imperial ambition. As black-armored inquisitors crossed the stars aboard imperial shuttles, another network of secret operations continued expanding behind them. Children were cataloged, temple records were seized, ancient maps were studied, hidden facilities received new prisoners. The Empire was quietly constructing a vast database of Force-related knowledge gathered from every corner of the galaxy. And somewhere within that growing collection of secrets lay the next stage of Palpatine's plan, one that would lead beyond surviving Jedi, beyond cloning research, and toward observatories that stared into regions of space where almost no one had ever gone. Were Palpatine's mysterious observatories scientific installations, navigational outposts, or the first stepping stones toward a hidden Sith empire beyond known space? The question becomes increasingly intriguing. The deeper one ventures into late Imperial history. Unlike the Death Star, Imperial observatories were not designed to dominate headlines or terrify planetary populations. Many citizens never heard of them. Even within the Imperial military, knowledge remained limited. Yet after the fall of the Empire, investigators repeatedly discovered strange facilities connected to Palpatine's personal interests. These sites contained star charts, ancient artifacts, navigation data, and records pointing toward places far beyond the familiar boundaries of the galaxy. Their existence suggests that while most of the Empire focused inward, Palpatine had been looking outward. One of the best-known examples appears on Jakku. Long before the scavengers of the Force Awakens searched its deserts, Jakku housed an Imperial observatory hidden beneath the planet's surface. Canon novels such as Aftermath reveal that Palpatine took a personal interest in the world. To most observers, Jakku seemed insignificant, a remote desert planet located far from the core. Yet Palpatine repeatedly directed attention toward it. The choice appears strange, until one realizes that Jakku's importance had little to do with the planet itself and everything to do with where it pointed. Why would the Emperor spend years studying routes into the unknown regions? The unknown regions represent one of the least understood areas in Star Wars canon. Vast navigational hazards make travel extraordinarily difficult. Gravitational anomalies, dangerous stellar phenomena, and incomplete maps turn many journeys into suicide missions. Even during the Republic era, exploration remained limited, yet Palpatine demonstrated unusual fascination with these territories. Throughout canon, he finances expeditions, gathers ancient navigational data, and directs trusted agents toward hidden pathways. He appears convinced that something important lies beyond known space. This fascination predates the Empire's collapse. During his reign, observatories served as collection points for information. Scientists analyzed astronomical data. Navigators studied routes. Intelligence officers gathered reports from explorers. Ancient records connected to forgotten civilizations received careful attention. The work resembled archaeology, astronomy, intelligence gathering, and mysticism all at once. Palpatine was assembling a map, not merely of territory, but of possibility. Another important observatory stood on Pilio, a lush world later visited during the events of Battlefront 2. Following the Battle of Endor in 4 ABY, former Imperial Special Forces Commander Iden Versio encountered evidence of the Emperor's contingency planning there. Hidden archives contained information reserved for select individuals. Advanced droids delivered posthumous instructions. Records pointed toward objectives that survived beyond Palpatine's apparent death. The observatories were not passive research stations. They were components of a larger machine. Why do so many of these facilities blend scientific exploration with Sith symbolism? Because for Palpatine, the distinction barely existed. The Emperor viewed ancient Sith knowledge as another source of strategic advantage. Throughout canon, he studies dark side artifacts, investigates forgotten temples, and seeks wisdom buried in ancient traditions. Unlike many Imperial officers, he never dismissed the supernatural dimensions of the galaxy. He understood that knowledge overlooked by others could become power. Observatories therefore served multiple purposes simultaneously. They gathered practical data while also supporting a much older search connected to Sith history. One figure who illustrates this overlap is Yupe Tashu. Introduced in the Aftermath trilogy, Tashu served as one of Palpatine's advisors and displayed deep fascination with Sith lore. Unlike conventional military leaders, he viewed the Empire through an almost religious lens. He believed Palpatine's plans extended far beyond ordinary governance, while Tashu's interpretations occasionally drifted toward fanaticism. His existence reveals something important. Even within the Empire, certain individuals recognized that the Emperor's ambitions were not purely political. Why did Palpatine care so much about preserving secrets after his own death? Most rulers focus on maintaining power while alive. Palpatine repeatedly planned for events beyond his lifetime. This habit appears throughout Imperial contingency structures. Hidden archives activate after Endor. Messenger droids carry pre-recorded commands. Select officers receive instructions that only make sense in the event of catastrophe. The observatories become critical nodes in this network. They preserve information. They guide chosen survivors. They ensure that long-term objectives remain achievable, even if the Empire itself collapses. This brings us to one of the most startling secret projects in Imperial history, Operation Cinder. Activated after the Battle of Endor, the operation shocked even loyal Imperial personnel. Messenger droids bearing Palpatine's likeness appeared before commanders across the galaxy. These machines delivered a simple message. If the Emperor had fallen, the Empire had failed him. Failure deserved punishment. The result was a campaign unlike anything most officers expected. Why would Palpatine deliberately attack worlds belonging to his own empire? The question horrified many of those ordered to participate. Operation Cinder deployed climate disruption satellites capable of creating devastating storms and environmental disasters. Worlds such as Vardos suffered catastrophic attacks. Entire populations faced destruction. Loyal citizens became targets. From a conventional perspective, the strategy seemed insane. Empires do not normally destroy themselves, yet Palpatine's logic followed a darker path. Throughout his life, Palpatine viewed institutions as extensions of his will. The Empire existed because he ruled it. If he no longer ruled, then the Empire had failed its purpose. Operation Cinder reflected that philosophy perfectly. It was not designed to preserve Imperial territory. It was designed to punish weakness and reshape the future. Those who survived would become something new, something harder, something more fanatically loyal. The events of Battlefront 2 reveal how divisive this plan became. Officers such as Admiral Garrick Versio embraced the Emperor's commands. Others, including Iden Versio, ultimately rejected them. Loyal soldiers suddenly found themselves confronting impossible choices: obey orders and destroy civilian populations, or betray the empire they had sworn to serve. Operation Cinder exposed the true nature of Palpatine's rule. Beneath promises of order and stability lay a willingness to sacrifice anyone for larger objectives. Why did so many roads seem to lead away from the known galaxy after Endor? Because that was exactly where surviving elements of Palpatine's vision were heading. The observatories, navigational records, contingency plans, and secret expeditions all pointed toward the unknown regions. Hidden fleets vanished into unexplored space. Selected personnel disappeared. Resources were quietly redirected. To outside observers, the Empire appeared to be collapsing. In reality, parts of it were relocating. As stars drifted across observatory viewports and ancient navigation charts glowed within secured archives, the final pieces of Palpatine's long game began moving into position. The Empire was dying in public. Secretly, something else was being born. Beyond dangerous hyperspace routes and unmapped regions of space, hidden shipyards and loyal followers waited in darkness. The secret projects that began with laboratories, cloning facilities, and observatories were now converging toward a single destination, one that would eventually give rise to both the First Order and something even more frightening. Were all of the Empire's secret projects ultimately preparing for a single destination hidden beyond the edge of the known galaxy? By the years following the Battle of Endor in 4 ABY, that question begins to feel less like speculation and more like an unavoidable conclusion. The Death Star had fallen. The Imperial Senate was long gone. Regional governors lost territory. Rebel forces became the New Republic. To most citizens, the Galactic Empire appeared to be dying. Yet beneath that visible collapse, certain pieces continued moving with surprising purpose. Fleets disappeared instead of surrendering. Scientists vanished rather than being captured. Secret archives activated exactly as planned. It was as though the Empire had been rehearsing its own defeat. The key lies in the unknown regions. Across canon novels, reference works, and sequel-era storytelling, surviving Imperial elements gradually migrate into territories inaccessible to most navigators. The journey is extraordinarily dangerous. Hyperspace routes are unstable. Gravitational anomalies threaten entire fleets. Navigation data becomes priceless. Ordinary star charts are often useless. Without carefully preserved information gathered through observatories and exploratory missions, survival would be nearly impossible. Why risk everything on a journey into one of the most dangerous regions of the galaxy? Because Palpatine had already concluded that rebuilding openly would fail, the New Republic inherited enormous advantages after Endor. Popular support favored the victors. Imperial infrastructure was fractured. Rival warlords competed for power. Remaining in known space meant gradual decline. Retreat offered something different: distance, secrecy, time. The same principles that governed Imperial laboratories now governed Imperial survival. The result was the emergence of what would eventually become the First Order. Canon establishes that surviving Imperial officers, military personnel, and loyalists established themselves within the unknown regions. There they rebuilt fleets, trained future generations, and developed new military doctrines. Unlike the old empire, which inherited existing institutions from the Republic, the First Order grew in isolation. It was shaped from the beginning by people who viewed the empire's collapse as proof that compromise had been a mistake. One of the fascinating ironies of this transformation is that many architects of the First Order considered themselves heirs to Palpatine's vision while simultaneously learning from imperial failures. Massive bureaucracies gave way to tighter control. Military indoctrination intensified. Entire generations grew up knowing little beyond the ideology surrounding them. The project extended beyond rebuilding an army. It involved creating a culture designed for perpetual loyalty. Why does Exegol sit at the center of so many mysteries? Because Exegol appears to be where multiple secret projects finally converge. Hidden deep within the unknown regions, the planet existed outside ordinary galactic awareness. Violent atmospheric conditions surrounded it. Dangerous navigation routes protected it. Ancient Sith traditions endured there through the Sith Eternal, a cult devoted to preserving and advancing Palpatine's legacy. When audiences finally see Exegol in the Rise of Skywalker, it feels simultaneously ancient and futuristic. Rituals coexist with advanced technology. Laboratories stand beside temples. This combination reveals something profound about Palpatine's long-term ambitions. Many leaders choose between science and mysticism. Palpatine pursued both. The cloning projects of Mount Tantus, the Force-related research of Project Necromancer, the navigational efforts of the observatories, the preservation of Sith knowledge. None of these were competing agendas. They were components of the same design. Exegol became the place where they intersected. Why build an entirely new fleet in secret when the Empire had already commanded thousands of Star Destroyers? The answer emerges with the final order. Hidden shipyards on Exegol produced enormous Zeiston-class Star Destroyers, each equipped with planet-destroying weaponry derived from technologies pioneered through earlier superweapon programs. This detail is crucial. The Death Star was not abandoned as a concept. Its underlying lessons were refined. Instead of concentrating power into a single battle station, destructive capability was distributed across an entire fleet. Decades of research evolved into a new form. Seen from this perspective, the history of Imperial secret projects begins resembling a chain reaction. Project Stardust proved planetary destruction was possible. Mount Tantus pursued biological and cloning breakthroughs. Project Necromancer explored survival beyond death. The observatories charted pathways into hidden territory. Operation Cinder cleared the path for transformation after defeat. Each initiative solved a different problem. Together, they supported a single long-term vision. Yet even here, mysteries remain. How many Imperial projects never reached completion? Canon offers tantalizing hints without providing complete answers. Across the galaxy, abandoned laboratories, sealed vaults, forgotten archives, and ruined facilities continue appearing in stories set after the Empire's fall. Some contain research records. Others contain weapons prototypes. A few appear connected to programs whose purposes remain unknown. The Empire's bureaucracy generated enormous quantities of classified work. Not every experiment reached success. Not every facility survived long enough to reveal its secrets. This uncertainty creates fertile ground for both speculation and storytelling. Perhaps some research stations were abandoned during Operation Cinder. Perhaps others lost contact with Imperial Command and faded into isolation. Perhaps some discoveries were deemed too dangerous even by Imperial standards. Canon remains largely silent on these possibilities. The silence itself becomes part of the atmosphere surrounding Imperial secrecy. A useful comparison comes from the older Legends continuity. In non-canon expanded universe stories, Imperial remnants often uncovered forgotten superweapons, hidden fleets, and classified projects left behind by Palpatine. Modern canon has chosen a different path in many details, but it retains the same underlying idea. The Empire was simply too vast to catalog completely. Even after its collapse, traces continued surfacing in unexpected places. Why do secret projects keep appearing decades after the Empire officially ended? Because institutions leave echoes. Laboratories remain standing after scientists leave. Archives survive after governments fall. Data survives after battles end. A classified project can outlive the officials who authorized it. Throughout real history and Star Wars history alike, the consequences of secret decisions often persist far longer than the organizations that created them. The Empire understood this. Palpatine understood it especially well. Imagine a forgotten facility somewhere in the Outer Rim. The generators have long since fallen silent. Dust covers control panels. Security doors remain locked because no one is left alive who knows the access codes. Data crystals sit undisturbed inside sealed vaults. Perhaps the project succeeded. Perhaps it failed. No one remembers. Yet the evidence remains, waiting for someone curious enough to uncover it. And that is what makes the history of Imperial secret projects feel different from the history of ordinary battles or political events. Battles end. Governments rise and fall. Secret projects linger. Their effects travel forward through decades, shaping futures their creators may never live to see. As the stars of the unknown regions burn quietly beyond mapped space and abandoned Imperial installations sleep beneath mountains, deserts, and oceans, one final mystery remains. Not what the Empire built, but how much of it is still out there, hidden in the dark. How many Imperial secrets remain undiscovered simply because no one survived long enough to tell their stories? It is a fitting question with which to end, because the history of the Empire's secret projects is ultimately a history of absence. Entire species vanished. Scientists disappeared into classified programs. Hidden facilities operated beyond public awareness. Records were sealed, destroyed, or buried beneath layers of security. Even now, long after the Empire's rise in 19 BBY, and long after its apparent fall at Endor in 4 ABY, there are corners of the galaxy where the full truth remains obscured. The Empire ruled through fear in public. In private, it ruled through silence. One reason these mysteries endure is the extraordinary scale of the galactic empire itself. At its height, Imperial territory stretched across millions of inhabited worlds. Sector governors administered vast regions. Countless military installations existed beyond the attention of Coruscant's political center. Even Palpatine could not personally oversee every project. Instead, He created systems that generated secrecy automatically. Compartmentalization ensured that knowledge remained fragmented. Most participants understood only a tiny piece of the larger picture. Why do abandoned Imperial facilities feel so unsettling in Star Wars stories? Because they often resemble tombs. Across modern canon, characters repeatedly encounter forgotten research stations, deserted listening posts, ruined laboratories, and sealed archives. The machinery remains, the architecture remains, yet the people are gone. Consider the empty Geonosian factories encountered in Rebels. Consider the hidden Imperial remnants scattered throughout the Mandalorian. Consider facilities damaged by war and left to decay after their strategic value vanished. These places preserve questions more effectively than answers. A recurring theme throughout Imperial history is that secrecy often survived longer than the projects themselves. Some programs succeeded spectacularly. Project Stardust culminated in the Death Star. Project Necromancer ultimately contributed to Palpatine's survival. The Observatory Network successfully guided Imperial remnants toward the unknown regions. Yet countless other initiatives faded into obscurity. Research budgets ended, supervisors died, political priorities shifted. Entire projects disappeared from history without ever revealing whether they succeeded or failed. Why was Palpatine so drawn to secret projects rather than open displays of power alone? Because secrecy offered something that military strength could not. A Star Destroyer demonstrates power everyone can see. A secret project creates possibilities no one else can anticipate. Again and again, Palpatine preferred advantages hidden beneath the surface. He concealed his Sith identity while serving as Chancellor. He concealed contingency plans while ruling as Emperor. He concealed cloning research while presenting confidence and stability. Secrecy was not merely a tactic, it was part of how he understood power itself. This habit distinguished him even from many previous Sith. The older Sith traditions emphasized hidden knowledge, certainly, but Palpatine operated on an unprecedented scale. Entire planetary economies supported projects they did not understand. Scientists worked on programs whose final objectives remained concealed. Military officers protected facilities without knowing what they contained. Looking back across the saga, one realizes that some of the Empire's most important achievements occurred far from battlefields. They happened in laboratories, archives, observatories, and underground vaults. Why do these stories continue resonating long after the Empire's defeat? Partly because they reveal a deeper layer of the Star Wars universe. The films naturally focus on heroes, villains, battles, and dramatic turning points. Secret projects show us what happened between those moments. They reveal the machinery operating beneath history's surface. The destruction of Alderaan becomes more disturbing when you understand the decades of research behind the weapon. The Emperor's return becomes more unsettling when you see how many years of preparation preceded it. Hidden stories give visible events new weight. There is also something timeless about these mysteries. Every civilization leaves behind unanswered questions. Ancient temples survive after their builders vanish. Forgotten ruins outlast the governments that created them. Records disappear. Motives become uncertain. In Star Wars, the Empire occupies that role surprisingly quickly. Within a few decades, its secret facilities begin feeling ancient. Younger generation Drykies encounter fragments of a past they never experienced directly. History becomes archaeology. A fascinating detail emerges when we compare the Empire's greatest successes with its greatest failures. The Death Star achieved operational status but was destroyed at Yavin in 0 BBY. The second Death Star reached partial completion but fell at Endor in 4 ABY. Operation Cinder inflicted devastation yet accelerated Imperial fragmentation. Even Project Necromancer required decades of effort and produced imperfect results. Again and again, Imperial projects achieve extraordinary feats while simultaneously revealing profound weaknesses. The Empire could build almost anything except permanence. Why did so many secret projects ultimately fail despite immense resources? Because they reflected the limitations of the people who created them. Palpatine possessed immense intelligence and extraordinary patience, yet his plans consistently depended upon control. The Death Star depended upon controlling fear. The Inquisitorius depended upon controlling Force users. Cloning research sought control over life and death. Operation Cinder sought control over the Empire's legacy. Time after time, individuals disrupted those plans through choices Palpatine failed to predict. Galen Erso hid a flaw. Vader chose his son. Rebel pilots found impossible opportunities. Control always encountered resistance. As you follow these stories to their quiet conclusion, the Empire begins to look less like a monolithic machine and more like a vast collection of ambitions layered upon one another. Some ambitions belong to scientists, some belong to admirals, some belong to fanatics. Most trace back directly or indirectly to Palpatine himself. Each project promised certainty. Each promised mastery over some aspect of existence. Together they formed a hidden history running beneath the visible history of the galaxy. And so we return to where we began. Deep beneath a mountain, behind sealed blast doors and forgotten security checkpoints, a silent corridor stretches into darkness. The generator stopped years ago. Dust settles across abandoned consoles. Data archives sleep inside locked vaults. Somewhere beyond the walls, stars continue their slow journeys through the night. The Empire is gone, its banners fallen, and its fleet scattered. Yet in places like this, the silence remains, guarding secrets that may never be fully uncovered. When you look across the history of the Empire's secret projects, a pattern begins to emerge that is larger than any laboratory, battle station, or hidden fleet. The Empire did not merely seek to rule the galaxy. It sought to remove uncertainty from existence itself. The Death Star promised freedom from rebellion through fear. The Inquisitorius promised freedom from rival Force traditions. Cloning projects promised freedom from mortality. The observatories promised freedom from the limits of known space. Again and again, the same impulse appears beneath different names and different technologies. It is the belief that enough power, enough knowledge, and enough control can finally make the future obey. That belief stands in quiet opposition to one of the deepest currents running through Star Wars. The Jedi do not survive because they are stronger than every enemy. They survive because they accept limits. They accept that life changes, that loss comes, that no being can hold everything forever. Palpatine spends his entire life resisting that truth. The more he fears uncertainty, the more secrets he creates. The more he fears death, the more resources he devotes to escaping it. By the end, his hidden projects stretch across decades and entire regions of the galaxy, yet they all orbit the same unresolved fear. What makes these stories so compelling is that many of the Empire's projects actually work. The Death Star functions. The Inquisitors hunt effectively. Secret observatories uncover routes no ordinary navigator could find. Exegol remains hidden for generations. This is not a tale in which evil fails because it is incompetent. It fails because power alone cannot solve the problems it is trying to solve. A superweapon cannot create loyalty. Cloning cannot guarantee wisdom. Fear cannot create lasting stability. The Empire repeatedly achieves its immediate goals while moving farther away from the future it actually desires. You can see this most clearly in the individuals scattered throughout the story. Galen Erso quietly places a flaw inside the Empire's greatest weapon. Omega carries something scientists cannot fully replicate. Eden Versio refuses to follow Operation Cinder into darkness. Darth Vader, after decades of serving tyranny, chooses his son over his master. Again and again, the most important turning points arise not from machines or secret research, but from choices. The Empire invests unimaginable effort into controlling outcomes, yet history keeps changing because living beings retain the ability to choose differently. Perhaps that is why so many Imperial facilities feel haunted long after they are abandoned. They are monuments to certainty in a galaxy defined by unpredictability. Their builders believed every variable could be accounted for, every threat neutralized, every future engineered. Yet time moves on. Governments fall. Knowledge escapes. Hidden projects become archaeological ruins. The sealed vaults remain, but the people who believed they could master destiny are gone. Their silence becomes part of the lesson. And so, as this long journey through the Empire's hidden history comes to rest, you find yourself back beneath that mountain. The corridor is still there. The blast doors remain closed. Faint dust drifts through motionless air. Somewhere beyond layers of stone, stars continue crossing the darkness exactly as they did before the Empire rose and exactly as they will long after it is forgotten. The technician is gone now. The scientists are gone. The Emperor is gone. And only the quiet remains, waiting in the depths of a forgotten hallway where secrets once seemed powerful enough to change the fate of the galaxy.